Megyn Kelly stood firm in her studio, cameras rolling, the bright lights reflecting off her perfectly styled blonde hair. Across from her sat Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, the rising Democratic star from Texas, wearing a bold red blazer that contrasted sharply with Kelly's navy blue dress. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. "The American people deserve better than your constant excuses," Kelly suddenly shouted, her voice rising to a level rarely heard even on her notoriously confrontational show. "For once, just shut up and listen to what regular Americans are saying." The studio fell deadly silent. Producers behind the glass windows froze. The camera operator zoomed in on Crockett's face, capturing the momentary shock in her eyes. But instead of backing down, the Congresswoman straightened her spine, looked directly into Kelly's eyes, and delivered a response so powerful, so unexpected, that it left not just Kelly, but everyone in the studio and millions of viewers at home completely speechless. What happened next would change both women's careers forever and send shockwaves through America's political landscape. Before we dive deeper into this explosive confrontation, don't forget to like this video and hit the subscribe button so you never miss our latest political showdowns and analysis. Megyn Kelly had built her career on fearless confrontation. From her days at Fox News challenging both Republicans and Democrats to her current role as an independent media powerhouse, she had developed a reputation for asking the questions others wouldn't dare. Her podcast and YouTube show, The Megyn Kelly Show, had become a must-watch for millions of Americans tired of mainstream media's perceived bias. At 53, Kelly had weathered controversies, network changes, and public criticism, emerging stronger each time. Her loyal viewers saw her as a truth-teller in a media landscape full of spin. "I don't care which party you're from," Kelly often said. "I care about cutting through the nonsense and getting to the truth." This approach had earned her both devoted fans and fierce critics. Exactly how she liked it. Sitting across from her that fateful Thursday afternoon was Representative Jasmine Crockett, the 42-year-old progressive firebrand from Texas' 30th Congressional District. A former civil rights attorney with a reputation for eloquence and sharp comebacks, Crockett had quickly become a leading voice for the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. Her appearances on cable news had gone viral multiple times for her ability to dismantle conservative talking points with precise legal arguments. "I don't come to play games," Crockett had told her staff before heading into Kelly's studio. "She thinks she can trap me with gotcha questions, but I've faced tougher opponents in courtrooms across Texas." The interview had been weeks in the making. Kelly's producers had pursued Crockett relentlessly, promising a fair but challenging conversation about recent Democratic policies and the upcoming election. Crockett, against the advice of some of her closest advisors, had accepted. "Democrats can't just talk to friendly audiences," she had told her communications director. "If we want to win, we have to face the tough questions head-on." The stakes couldn't have been higher. With elections looming, both women knew this interview would be watched by millions. For Kelly, it was a chance to cement her reputation as one of the few hosts willing to challenge powerful Democrats. For Crockett, it was an opportunity to reach conservative viewers who might never see her unfiltered message otherwise. The interview started cordially enough, standard questions about inflation, border policy, and the president's health. But 20 minutes in, Kelly shifted to a topic that would ignite the powder keg: recent protests at college campuses and Crockett's statements defending students' right to demonstrate. "You've defended these protesters who are clearly breaking the law," Kelly said, leaning forward, her voice taking on a harder edge. "How can you as a lawmaker justify lawlessness?" Crockett began her response. "I think we need to separate peaceful protest, which is a constitutional right, from any isolated incidents." Kelly cut her off. "But these aren't isolated. We've seen consistent patterns of disruption, intimidation, and harassment. You know that's not constitutionally protected?" The conversation quickly heated up as both women talked over each other. The producers, sensing ratings gold, told the camera operators to capture every reaction shot possible. Neither woman was willing to back down. The stakes were too high, the audience too large, and their reputations on the line. What started as a policy discussion was quickly becoming personal, and everyone in the studio could feel the tension building toward an explosive climax. The temperature in the studio seemed to rise with each passing minute. Staffers exchanged nervous glances as Kelly and Crockett battled over increasingly sensitive topics. Camera operators zoomed in tight on both women's faces, capturing every micro-explanation of anger and determination. "Congresswoman, let's talk about your statement last week," Kelly said, picking up a printed sheet of paper. "You said, and I quote, 'Some of these critics would have told Rosa Parks to go to the back of the bus if they lived back then.' Are you seriously comparing today's disruptive campus protesters to civil rights heroes?" Crockett leaned forward, unfazed. "What I'm saying is that throughout American history, protest has always been controversial in its time. People who are comfortable with the status quo have always tried to silence those fighting for change." "That's a false equivalence and you know it," Kelly interrupted, her voice rising. "Rosa Parks wasn't shutting down classrooms or preventing other students from getting an education." "If I could finish my point," Crockett said firmly, maintaining her composure, "the methods may differ, but the principle of standing up against perceived injustice remains consistent. And let's remember that many civil rights protests were indeed disruptive by design." "Oh, come on," Kelly exclaimed, throwing her hands up. "You're a lawyer. You know there's a clear legal distinction between peaceful protest and what we're seeing now." The back and forth continued, with Kelly pressing harder and Crockett refusing to be steamrolled. The control room was buzzing with excitement. Ratings were likely soaring as the confrontation escalated. Sensing she wasn't making headway, Kelly shifted tactics. "Let's move to another topic where your position seems flexible," she said, her tone dripping with skepticism. "Last year, you criticized politicians who flip-flop on issues, but your own position on police funding has changed dramatically since you entered Congress. How do you explain that contradiction to voters?" Crockett's eyes narrowed slightly. "There's a difference between evolving your position based on new information and flip-flopping for political convenience. My core values haven't changed." "But your votes have," Kelly pressed, holding up another document. "Here's your voting record. Would you like me to read it to refresh your memory?" A producer signaled from off-camera, indicating they needed to go to break soon, but Kelly waved him off. She was too focused on the mounting confrontation to stop now. "Ms. Kelly," Crockett said, her voice steady but with a new edge, "I'm happy to discuss my record, but if you're going to present information, at least present it accurately and completely. Context matters." "The context is that you said one thing to get elected and did another once you got to Washington," Kelly shot back. "It's a simple point that you're dancing around." The Congresswoman's press secretary, watching from the sidelines, was frantically texting with their team. This interview was not going as planned, but Crockett appeared to be holding her own, despite Kelly's increasingly aggressive approach. Kelly turned to yet another topic. "You've been very vocal about defending the administration's economic policies, yet inflation is hitting your own constituents harder than most. How do you justify, if you'd look at the actual economic data for my district," Crockett interjected, "you'd see that unemployment is down and wages are up. Cherry-picking statistics doesn't give your viewers the full picture." Kelly's face flushed slightly. "I'm not cherry-picking anything. These are facts from the Bureau of Labor Statistics." "Partial facts without context," Crockett countered. "And if we're going to talk about my district, I live there, I talk to my constituents daily. I doubt you've spent much time in South Dallas recently." The personal challenge seemed to touch a nerve with Kelly. Her jaw tightened visibly, and she shuffled her notes with more force than necessary. The studio crew could sense something building, a breaking point approaching fast. "You know what I find interesting, Congresswoman," Kelly said, her voice now cold and precise. "You and your colleagues are very quick to play the expert on everything from economics to foreign policy, but when pressed on specific failures, there's always an excuse, always a deflection." Crockett started to respond, but Kelly continued talking over her. Billy's conversation was spiraling, with both women trying to speak simultaneously. The sound engineer scrambled to balance the microphone levels as their voices rose. "This is exactly what Americans are tired of," Kelly continued, her volume increasing with each word. "Politicians who can't give a straight answer." Crockett tried again to speak, pointing out that Kelly wasn't allowing her to finish a single thought. And then it happened, the moment that would soon explode across social media and news programs nationwide. Kelly's patience snapped entirely. She slammed her hand on the desk between them and shouted, "For once, just shut up and listen to what regular Americans are saying." The outburst echoed through the studio. A production assistant dropped a clipboard. The floor director's mouth fell open. In the control room, The executive producer whispered, "Holy shit, tell me we got that." The studio fell into complete silence in the wake of Kelly's outburst. All eyes turned to Congresswoman Crockett, waiting for her reaction to this unprecedented moment of television. The silence that followed Kelly's outburst lasted only seconds, but it felt like an eternity to everyone in the studio. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch, didn't look away, and didn't show a hint of intimidation. Instead, she took a slow, deliberate breath, straightened the papers in front of her, and looked directly at Kelly with a gaze so steady it was almost unsettling. "Is that how you speak to all your guests, Ms. Kelly?" Crockett asked, her voice remarkably calm but carrying throughout the silent studio, or just the black ones. The question hung in the air like a thunderclap before the storm. Kelly's eyes widened almost imperceptibly, her face suddenly draining of color. She hadn't expected this response. Not the calm, not the directness, and certainly not the implication. I don't... Kelly stammered, visibly struggling to regain her composure. For perhaps the first time in her broadcasting career, Megyn Kelly was at a loss for words. Crockett didn't wait for Kelly to recover. With the precision of the skilled attorney she was, she seized the moment. "Let me be very clear about something," Crockett continued, her voice gaining strength but never raising to a shout. "I've been told to shut up my entire life. As a woman, as a black woman, as a civil rights attorney defending people whose society had written off, and now as a congresswoman fighting for my constituents." She leaned forward slightly, maintaining unwavering eye contact with Kelly. "But here's what you and others like you fail to understand. Each time someone tells me to shut up, it only confirms I'm saying something they need to hear, something that challenges their comfortable worldview." The control room was absolutely silent. No one dared speak or even signal the hosts. The camera operator, sensing the historic nature of the moment, kept the shot wide enough to capture both women, but tight enough to miss nothing of their expressions. "You invited me here today," Crockett continued, "presumably because you wanted to hear my perspective. Yet the moment my perspective challenges your narrative, you literally shout at me to shut up. And you wonder why Americans are divided? Why constructive dialogue seems impossible?" Kelly, a veteran of countless contentious interviews, tried to regain control. "Congresswoman, I wasn't suggesting—" "Please, Miss Kelly," Crockett said, raising her hand slightly. "I listened when you spoke. I didn't interrupt your questions, even when they contained misleading premises. I think you owe me the same respect. Unless, of course, this isn't actually an interview, but merely political theater designed to humiliate your guests." The studio remained deathly quiet. Even Kelly's most loyal staffers were transfixed by Crockett's measured response to what should have been a career-defining embarrassment. "Now, to address your actual concern, before you decided civility wasn't necessary," Crockett pivoted smoothly. "You suggested I don't listen to regular Americans. Let me tell you about the regular Americans I spoke with just yesterday." She reached into her portfolio and pulled out several handwritten notes. "This is from Maria Gonzalez, a single mother of 3 in my district who works 2 jobs. She wrote to thank me for supporting expanded child tax credits that helped her afford childcare." Crockett held up another note. "This is from James Wilson, a Vietnam veteran who had been fighting the VA for disability benefits for 8 years before my office helped him." She placed the notes carefully on the table. "These are the regular Americans I not only listen to, but fight for every single day. So while you may believe shouting at an elected representative to shut up makes for good television, I believe respectful dialogue makes for good governance." Kelly, finally finding her voice, attempted to salvage the situation. "Congresswoman, if you felt my tone was disrespectful, I apologize, but my frustration comes from what many viewers feel, that their concerns about inflation, crime, and border security are being dismissed by Washington." "I understand frustration," Crockett responded. "The Americans I represent are frustrated too. They're frustrated when they see their representatives shouted down rather than heard. They're frustrated when complex issues are reduced to sound bites and gotcha moments. They're frustrated when the media personalities who claim to speak for them seem more interested in creating viral clips than understanding nuanced policy positions." Kelly's producer was frantically signaling that they needed to cut to commercial, but Kelly, sensing this moment would define the interview regardless, made one last attempt to reassert control. "Let's be honest about what's happening here," Kelly said. "You're trying to make this about race to avoid answering difficult questions." The trap was set, but Crockett was too experienced to fall for it. "No, Ms. Kelly," she said with a smile that somehow conveyed both confidence and disappointment. "I'm making this about respect, about the difference between an interview and an ambush, about the kind of discourse that either elevates our democracy or diminishes it." She reached for her water glass and took a small sip before delivering her final point. "You know, before coming here today, my team warned me this might happen. They showed me clips of your interviews with other Democratic lawmakers, especially women of color. They told me you might try to provoke me into an angry response that would reinforce certain stereotypes. I told them I had more faith in your professionalism than that." She paused, letting the implication sink in. "I guess we were both disappointed today." The studio remained completely silent. Kelly's producer was now frantically waving his arms, pointing at his watch. They were well over time for the commercial break, but no one, not even Kelly, seemed willing to break the moment. Finally, Kelly nodded slightly and said, "We'll be right back after these messages." As the red light on the camera turned off, indicating they were no longer live, Kelly removed her microphone and stood up without a word, walking quickly off the set toward her office. The staff, unsure what to do, looked at each other in stunned silence. Congresswoman Crockett remained seated, calmly gathering her notes and sipping her water, the picture of composure. One of the production assistants approached her nervously. "Congresswoman, that was. Would you like some water or anything during the break?" Crockett smiled warmly at the young woman. "I'm fine, thank you. But I think Miss Kelly might need a moment." The aftermath of the Kelly-Crockett confrontation was immediate and seismic. While the show was still on commercial break, clips of the exchange were already being uploaded to social media platforms. By the time the broadcast returned, with a noticeably subdued Kelly and a composed Crockett finishing a much more civil conversation, the initial clip of Kelly shouting "shut up" and Crockett's measured response had already been viewed hundreds of thousands of times. When the full segment hit YouTube an hour after the broadcast, it exploded. Within 24 hours, the video titled "Congresswoman Crockett's Perfect Response to Megyn Kelly's Outburst" had accumulated over 15 million views. Hashtags like "Never Shut Up, Crockett Composure" and "Megyn Meltdown" dominated social media platforms. On cable news networks that evening, the clip played on constant rotation. Even conservative commentators who typically aligned with Kelly found themselves in the uncomfortable position of having to acknowledge the unprofessionalism of her outburst. "Look, we all have our moments," said one Fox News host, "but telling a sitting congresswoman to shut up crossed a line that shouldn't be crossed in professional journalism." Progressive outlets were less forgiving. "What we witnessed today was the perfect encapsulation of how women of color in positions of power are treated," said an MSNBC analyst. "They are expected to show emotion so they can be labeled as angry or stay calm and be called detached." Congresswoman Crockett threaded that needle masterfully. Social media users dissected every second of the exchange. Body language experts posted videos analyzing Crockett's composed posture versus Kelly's increasingly agitated movements. Communication coaches used the clip as a masterclass in how to respond to provocation without losing your cool. Notice how Crockett never raises her voice, never becomes defensive, but also never backs down, one viral TikTok explained. She flipped the entire power dynamic of the interview in 30 seconds of perfect communication. By evening, the White House had weighed in. The press secretary, when asked about the exchange during the daily briefing, responded, "While the president respects the free press and the essential role journalists play in our democracy, he also believes in treating all people with dignity and respect." Congresswoman Crockett demonstrated remarkable poise in a difficult situation. Kelly's team quickly went into crisis management mode. Her executive producer released a statement that evening. "The Megyn Kelly Show prides itself on asking tough questions of people in power, regardless of party affiliation. Today's exchange with Congresswoman Crockett became more heated than intended, and Ms. Kelly has reached out privately to the Congresswoman." Kelly herself posted a brief statement on social media. "In the heat of an important policy discussion, I let my passion for getting answers for the American people get the better of me. My tone with Congresswoman Crockett was inappropriate, and for that I apologize. I look forward to having her back on the show for a more productive conversation in the future." The apology received mixed reactions. Many of Kelly's supporters defended her, claiming she was just asking the tough questions other journalists wouldn't. Critics pointed out that the apology addressed her tone but not the actual command to shut up, nor the racial implication Crockett had highlighted. Crockett's response to the situation was strategic and measured. Rather than dwelling on the confrontation itself, she used the massive attention to redirect focus to policy issues. In a press conference the following morning, she addressed the situation briefly before pivoting. "What happened yesterday wasn't about me or Miss Kelly. It was symptomatic of the breakdown in civil discourse that's plaguing our country. Instead of talking about that exchange, I'd rather talk about the child poverty rate in my district that dropped 30% because of policies we passed. I'd rather discuss the infrastructure projects bringing jobs to communities that have been overlooked for decades. That's what actually matters." This approach only amplified her rising star status. Political analysts across the spectrum noted her ability to navigate a potentially damaging encounter and transform it into a platform for her message. "Crockett just gave a masterclass in political judo," said a CNN commentator. "She took Kelly's aggression and redirected it in a way that served her own purposes." That's the mark of a skilled communicator and strategist. The long-term implications quickly became apparent. Crockett's office reported a surge in campaign donations, with over $2.00, $3 million raised in the 48 hours following the interview, a staggering sum for a House member not in a competitive district. Her social media following doubled, and speaking requests flooded in from across the country. More surprisingly, several moderate Republicans in Congress reached out to Crockett about potential bipartisan legislation. Her composure and focus on substance rather than spectacle impressed a lot of people on both sides of the aisle, an anonymous GOP staffer told Politico. For Kelly, the fallout was more complicated. While her core audience largely stood by her, major advertisers became nervous about the controversy. 2 national brands paused their sponsorship of her show pending a review of editorial standards and practices. Her ratings initially spiked as people tuned in to see how she would address the controversy, but industry analysts questioned whether the bump would last or if the incident had damaged her brand in the long run. Media critics used the exchange as a jumping-off point for broader discussions about journalistic standards in an era of infotainment and partisan media. "What we saw between Kelly and Crockett represents a crossroads for political media," wrote a Columbia Journalism Review analyst. Is the goal to inform the public through substantive dialogue or to generate viral moments and advertisement revenue through manufactured conflict? Kelly chose the latter, and Crockett exposed the hollowness of that approach. 1 week after the confrontation, a more lasting consequence emerged. A major network announced they had signed Crockett to provide regular political analysis, a platform that would significantly expand her national profile beyond her congressional role. The press release specifically cited her ability to communicate complex policy positions with clarity and grace under pressure as a key factor in their decision. Meanwhile, former staffers from Kelly's previous network positions began speaking to the press about a pattern of similar behavior behind the scenes. Now, the shut-up moment wasn't an aberration, one former colleague told the Daily Beast. It was just the first time it happened on air, with someone who knew exactly how to respond. 2 weeks after the confrontation, both women found themselves on Time magazine's annual list of the 100 most influential people. Crockett's profile, written by a former Supreme Court justice, praised her for elevating our political discourse by refusing to descend to the level of those attempting to provoke her. Kelly's profile acknowledged her as a lightning rod in the ongoing battle over media ethics and the line between challenging interview and personal attack. Perhaps the most telling aftermath came 3 months later when Kelly's contract came up for renewal. While she maintained her platform, industry insiders reported that her negotiating leverage had been significantly weakened by the controversy. Her new contract included specific clauses about professional conduct during interviews and required additional editorial oversight for segments with elected officials. For political communication experts, the Kelly-Crockett exchange became required viewing in training sessions. Democratic strategists used it to teach candidates how to maintain composure under hostile questioning. Republican media trainers used it to demonstrate the pitfalls of appearing to bully opponents rather than challenging their ideas. What's remarkable about this exchange, said a political science professor at Georgetown, is how clearly it demonstrates the power dynamics in political media. Kelly had all the institutional advantages. It was her show, her platform, her rules. Yet Crockett, through sheer force of character and strategic thinking, completely inverted that power structure in less than a minute. 6 months after the infamous shut-up moment, the two women encountered each other at a Washington media gala. Attendees reported that they spoke briefly but cordially, with Kelly approaching Crockett first. No one could hear what was said, but photographs captured a moment where both women smiled genuinely, perhaps the first sign that even the most explosive confrontations can eventually lead to mutual respect, if not agreement. The final measure of the incident's impact came during the next election cycle. When Crockett announced her intention to run for higher office, her campaign launch video included a subtle but unmistakable reference to the Kelly confrontation. "Throughout my career, I've been told to be quiet, to wait my turn, even to shut up," she said, looking directly into the camera. "But I believe that when the stakes are this high, silence is not an option, and I will never stop speaking up for those who need a voice." The video broke fundraising records for its first 24 hours. The confrontation between Megyn Kelly and Jasmine Crockett serves as a powerful reminder of how a single moment can redefine careers, shift power dynamics, and reveal character. It demonstrated that in an era of shouting and provocation, composure and principle can still prevail. Most importantly, it showed that sometimes the most powerful response to shut up is to speak your truth even more clearly. If you found this breakdown of the Kelly-Crockett confrontation informative, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth analysis of the most impactful political moments. Hit that notification bell to stay updated on our latest uploads and share your thoughts in the comments below. Would you have responded differently in Crockett's position? We'd love to hear your perspective on this defining political media moment.